Hello and welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another edition of RSF Radio. I'm your host, Joe Monday, and I have a very special guest all the way from the other side of the world, even though he's currently in the U.S., DocFugu, a.k.a. FuguTabetai. How you doing, man?
I'm doing good. Thanks for having me on.
Oh, no, it's one of those things where once I saw all of the blog posts and like articles that you've written covering fighting games in Japan, I was like, it would be great to have this person on. It would be great to talk to this person on this show, because I brought up your articles on this show a number of times, but I was like, but he's in Japan, and that's like, it's really hard to schedule things in between Japan and the U.S., especially for like things like recording a podcast, because that's on the other side of the world. We could potentially have done it on a weekend, but then it's like, I don't know. There's a whole other like number of issues when recording from literally the other side of the world, but I digress. Anyway, I'm excited to have you on. I want to talk about what you have going on. So you got to hit me up with all the stuff right up front. Like, where can people find you? What should people look for in terms of your stuff? We got to get that out of the way. First things first.
Absolutely. Well, so it's pretty easy. You can go to Twitter. I'm DocFugu on there because I couldn't get FuguTabetai. FuguTabetai is the nom de plume I've been going by since maybe 1999. You can reach me there at FuguTabetai.com. Spelled just like you'd spell it in Japanese if you wanted to eat fugu, which is what it means. Turns out that's kind of hard to romanize. So, probably DocFugu is a bit easier anyway. The only thing that I do one thing, and, it's not very big and it's not very important, but I track locals that happen in Tokyo. And very specifically, I'm very clear on the kinds of things I try to track are things that you can go to that's an event that's either sort of a regularly held fighting game event or maybe kind of a little special one-off thing. But they're not big tournaments. Mm-hmm. I don't track online tournaments. I don't track stuff in Osaka. I just wanted to know, one day, what are some fighting game events I could go to in Tokyo? And I started to look, and there's a bunch, and there wasn't really much accessible English information about what those were. In fact, I've been into fighting games since maybe 91 or 92, when Street Fighter II, The World Warrior came out. Right. And I've been in Tokyo for 12 years, but I never knew about any of the stuff going on there until I heard there was a podcast called The Jump In, I believe, with Logan Sama and Kim All Day 1-2-3-4. And offhand, Kim just mentioned that there's a Wednesday night Street Fighter V local in Akihabara, and I was like, really? And so I joined Twitter, and I said, oh, well, there is. How come I never knew this stuff? And then I started to track local events, the kinds of things that I'd like to go to. I put it on a blog so that maybe Google can index it and other people can find stuff.
Yeah, that's the whole other issue of that's something that I don't think a lot of people consider when thinking about where people find information. Is typically people just go to Google and type the thing into the search bar, and a lot of the time the way that things are indexed does not apply to where actual information is kept in the fighting game community. But it's funny that you bring up the jump. I remember that's what a throwback, thinking about that podcast, which I feel like there weren't more than 20 episodes of that. Not like,
well, they were good.
They were good. Yeah, they were good episodes. You're not wrong. Definitely good information to pull from them, because it's one of those things where good information good content within the FGC is sometimes often fleeting, because people enter and exit with seasons in their life. Things happen, things come up, people move on or move into different roles. So not crazy to have things come up and spin off. Logan's now doing a whole, I don't know if it has a name, but he's doing a whole another podcast series now. Does it have a name?
It's just doing interviews with the Frame Advantage guys. I'm not too sure. I've seen that stuff. It's really good.
Yeah, but, I watched the one with him and Punk and Lord Problem just the other day. Or That was this morning. I watched it this morning. Anyway, let's not talk about time and in memoriam, but yeah, you're right. You've provided a good service now, because in today's world, one would think, that arcades even in Japan, the arcade scene is, I don't want to say, I mean, it's not dead, obviously. You can go to like any arcade and get games, but it's not like Street Fighter 4 era, like 2009, this is the arcade. You're going to have trouble finding a seat, in fact.
Right. Yeah. Well, it depends, I think, a lot on the game and on the arcade. So
yeah, there's a whole like infrastructure to how fighting games even work in 2019, right? It's completely changed. So like, where would you look? And I think you provided like a good list of where someone could get games. In fact.
Yeah, I have a couple. I mean, I don't know the arcade scene very well myself, because what I like to do is I like to go out once a week to a place where there's lots of people, that has a bar where I can get drinks, so I can play a few games and then drink a bit and talk a bit and play a few more games. So the arcades are a good scene, but it's a different kind of scene. And yeah, for me, I just love that we have these little places where you can go that have kind of a casual setting where you can drink and talk. If you are interested in sort of arcade hotspots in Japan, so Majin Obama does a bunch of stuff promoting those things. There actually is a pretty good place to get information about different events that arcades have. So arcades also have regular weekly gatherings where, well, let's say here we'll do a tournament for Tekken or whatever. There's the kakugechecker.com website that is essentially a database, and they track, also the arcade sort of weekly things that, what's going on at Mikado or, Sugumo or things like that. But it's also difficult to get a hold of in English, and there's so many of those that I said, well, I'm not going to, track those. I've got a limited amount of time of what I can do. Right. And although I will say, you're right, getting information is hard and centralized. I keep trying to push information about toptier.gg. So you had those guys on before, and they have pretty good databases of stuff going on locally. So when I travel, I hit up toptier.gg and say, okay, what's in this area? I found Balance Patch, the Boston local run by Traveling Controller, which I guess those guys were on your show as well.
Yeah, Lucky D, Burkish were on the show in a tag team. Yeah.
Right. And I found a few places in Dallas, although that was more from fishing around on Twitter and hooking up with a Facebook group. So, I think that's a problem. There's no real centralized place to get information. I hope toptier.gg or there's a Sea Leaf Dojo and some other places that are doing things like that. But Twitter's not the right place.
They seem to be doing very well. I even talked about that on last week's episode with Ultra David, which I should clarify. At the time of we're recording this on the Friday after that episode has aired, so this is like the day after tomorrow kind of business. Trying to get stuff out of the way for the Evo run-up.
Yeah, none of us know what happened at Defend the North or Versus Fighting. My Twitter timeline is populated with all the Japanese people that I follow, like, we're in England now, or, Storm Kubo, he's a great guy. He's always posting about his adventures. He's wandering around Europe and like, I bumped into these random people and he's got a big church. And yeah, there's all sorts of stuff going on and I have no idea what's happened.
Yeah, we are in the past, unfortunately, speaking to you in the future. But so we can't comment on the things that have happened this past weekend, which I'm sure a lot has been shook up. But today, Friday, we're talking about the 19th. Today, you can go to the SFL Smash GG page and vote for the online community member that. No, hold on. How do they call it? Community vote for the people in the Street Fighter League USA Season 2 is I guess, most of the wording that they use to describe that. You can go vote today. I think it's going to be open until like the end of the month. I would need to have that up in front of me, which we'll get before the end of the show. But I bring that up because specifically, a lot of the information that you've documented at your website at the FuguTabetai.com is pretty much like the origins of the SFL and what it was before it was even the SFL. Something I've talked about on this show is that when the SFL USA first popped up over here, it was like, oh, but they've actually been doing this in Japan, and they've been doing it for like basically like a whole calendar year. Like, this is not like a new thing, but also, surprise, none of us in the US or even in the EU have even heard of this stuff. So where's it even coming from? But you have all the information. So tell me a little bit about the history of the SFL.
Okay, well, I can talk about my supposition of what it
Okay.
is. So
Fair enough.
Back in the summer of 2018, all of a year ago, there was a new thing that came up, which was the Rage Street Fighter V All-Star League powered by Capcom, and I think that's interesting because you'll notice in January 2019 there was the Capcom Street Fighter League powered by Rage. Right, so keep those. The Rage flips around, but they're still involved.
Wait a minute. You will need to repeat those two bits because you did a flip on my brain because I actually don't know what you're talking about right now.
Oh, okay. So in the summer of 2018,
right.
Rage. So first, maybe what is Rage, right? When this thing came out,
we need to reel it all the way back because you've totally fucked my brain up.
I said, this looks pretty interesting. Rage seems like they're running big stuff. So they had run up until then. They're kind of an esports organization, tournament. They run tournaments, and they run pretty big ones. They rent out, I think, part of Makuhari Messe. So this is the big event space that a lot of sort of worldwide conferences and things like that are held at. If you know there's like a World Arcade thing that goes on in Japan, and it's held over there. The JP premiere that's hosted with Tokyo Game Show is held out of that. So Rage will rent that thing out sometimes, and they've done tournaments there. Usually card games and stuff. So I looked when they first announced this All-Star League for Street Fighter, what it was. So it's an esports tournament which is formed by CyberZ back in November of 2015. And then I'm like, okay, what's CyberZ? Well, CyberZ is a subsidiary of Cyber Agent, which is kind of an advertising thing that expanded into blog platforms. And actually they're related to some other larger worldwide advertising company. But Cyber Agent actually owns, Cygames and a few other media companies.
Okay. It's all wrapping up together now.
It's all kind of interrelated. So at least in 2017, when I looked at this, they had about 3.4 billion US in revenue with a profit of 280 million or so is some public numbers that I found.
Right. Cygames is like huge. They're fucking huge.
They're pretty big. And they're actually Cygames. They're part of Cyber Agent, right? So Cyber Agent ostensibly is bigger, but it's kind of like media and marketing is my understanding. And anyway, Rage came up as a part of that, and they've been doing tournaments and so they do run like a Shadowverse tournament and a whole bunch of these things. They'll have usually a fall and a winter tournaments where they do stuff. They started getting into Street Fighter V, and the first big thing that I saw for that was this Rage Street Fighter V All-Star League powered by Capcom. And that was summer of 2018. It's not a big surprise. I think maybe at the time, I thought it'd be really cool because, we had a bunch of captains for the teams. There was Nemo. This is where, if you watch the Japan Street Fighter League, they had these colors associated with the players, right? So there's the Nemo Aurora. It's a kind of purple. Itazan Ocean, Mago was on, I believe, Tokido was Flame, and Sunrise Moke, Umehara Gold, and Fujimura Emerald, right? So they were captains.
Which, by the way, I am hyper bummed out that they did not keep those names for the US version. Those names are so good. Emerald, Ocean.
I was expecting that too, but they still stuck with the color theme,
and like the design of all this, like all of like the design work around specifically that part of it is all the same. except for the names.
Yeah, like Storm, and yeah, it's a little different. But
it's kind of wild.
So for this Rage, they had, they just chose 6 people. I don't know how or why they chose them, but they did. I think they, took some strong players. These are all, very, very strong players. Mm-hmm. Then they had a draft, and the teams were basically, consisted of pro players that everybody would know, right? So at the time, maybe I think the least known player on any team would have been Machibo, who was on Itazan's Ocean team, right? Machibo, like I was like, this is Guilty Gear, right? What are we doing? But yeah, Machibo was, the only sort of lesser known player. Everyone else, like, we all know. It was a very fun little series, and it was the same sort of thing where, they had these teams of all the pro players, they're very good. They did round robin between all the teams, and then the top, 2 or 3 teams went on then to later do a playoff, right? So same sort of thing. And I thought it was really fun. They brought in Ayako Hata, who's a Japanese sort of news announcer or MC, and doesn't know anything about Street Fighter, but sort of pretty lady that knows how to talk and be on TV. And she did really great interviews, and it was a lot of fun just kind of watching over the season as she learned about Street Fighter. They'd have little clips where they show her, they're trying to teach her how to use Abigail or something. All sorts of fun stuff.
Okay, so I guess my question with that, did it come across like disingenuous at all, or was it all very like good and pure of, here's an outsider, they're here to present the show, they know that they don't know anything and are here to just have fun with it?
Yeah, well, they brought in TV talent for doing the sort of MC running and things like that. So now the announcers, the commentary team was Hamiko, and I'd have to go back and look at it. Changed around sometimes, but they used established FGC commentary teams to do the commentary and analysis. But then as an MC, they had someone who was not from the FGC, and this Ayako Hata was kind of like the reporter who would do interviews and sort of human interest stuff in between the matches. And, I really got the impression it was more about, we're bringing in people that know how to do TV and TV production, work behind the camera and run that stuff. And then for the fighting game stuff, we'll let the fighting game people do that. And now I didn't really do strong research before doing this, but I'm pretty sure that the people that were making the rules for the setups and how to do the round robin, and they had really extensive rules on what happens if a controller breaks or if there's a disconnect. That was all done by, I believe, Toyota-san Nanshi, who runs just a lot of stuff in the Japan FGC. So the rules and all of that setup and the format for the show was sort of from the FGC, but then they brought in this production stuff, production companies. Really, it was filmed with Abema TV, which is a streaming service, which is part of Cyber Agent that basically is running a large streaming site in Japan. And they film it at a studio that the Open Rec Abema TV Studios, which is, they're a quite nice sort of streaming setup.
Yeah, no, that's an interesting idea, right? Because I feel like what we've seen, at least in the US, is that there are people who are strictly FGC, and it's like as soon as the FGC steps outside of people who are within the community, there's like a whole bunch of side eye. But in this instance, it feels like, no, they were just like, let's give the jobs to people who know how to do this job for this specific task. We'll keep the FGC stuff FGC, but if we need someone to put on a show, we're going to get someone in show business. And that it sounds like how this was run. And from what I could tell, the players really had a good time with it.
I think they did. I wasn't there, so I didn't, wasn't at any of the filming of this stuff, so I don't really know. But looking at the Twitter timelines at the time, it was a lot of fun. They really also spent a lot of time with, they'll have a couple minutes in between the sets, and they'll talk and joke around, and those just are always great. There was a draft for this thing, so they had the 6 captains ahead of time, and then afterwards, they had them draft all the other players, right? And so they had some interviews with Daigo. and there was a short, they posted up a clip of a video with Daigo where it's after the draft, and he was, kind of unhappy. He's like, it didn't go like I planned. I really wanted to get Fudo on my team, but Tokido took him, and so he didn't get who he wanted. But he seemed to have quite a bit of fun. His team ended up being Daigo, Sako, and Bonchan. So it's not like you can complain that he had a bad team, right?
But he's also saying that with them standing right behind him.
Right. Well, they did the interview out in a hallway, right? But
okay.
I mean, one of the funny themes throughout this first season was that Tokido's team was on Flame. It was Tokido, Fudo, and Mago, right? And man, Mago he gets a lot of shit because like everyone's like, oh, he's like the worst player, and then he's all they give him a lot of crap, but everyone loves Mago, right? So it's just really funny because he's been in all three of these things, and just sort of the evolution and just watching the interaction between the players, you can tell that they're all really having a good time. The one thing I don't get is we've got this epic rivalry between Nemo and Itabashi.
Right.
I see them around at the locals. I talk to Itabashi. We're friendly. I'm a Zangief main. I'm really horrible. So, I try not to glom onto him and act like a complete idiot, but we chat every once in a while. And he's a really great guy. Nemo, I've talked to a couple times. He's a nice guy. And I cannot for the life of me tell if these guys hate each other or if they like each other or what. I really can't.
I think it's all part of the show. I think it's all show business. It's all smoke and mirrors.
Well, there's definitely passion behind it, right?
Right.
Because they'll be playing sets, locally, and it's not like they're just letting water flow into the bridge and they're happy about stuff. Is people like, getting kind of worked up. But it's really great to see their interaction and the way that they interact on Twitter. Is just a huge amount of fun. I sometimes will translate some tweets, but I don't have enough time to really do much of it. There's other people that do that now. Follow FGC Translated and Sentimental Typhoon, and there's a bunch of people that do great stuff. But they have a really interesting dynamic, and I just love those two and some of the moments that they create. And they had some really good moments in these Street Fighter leagues as well.
Yeah, so that was season 1 powered by Capcom.
That was Rage powered by Capcom. Right. And just at the very end, I think I should check my notes here, but Itazan's team won it. Right. Yes, in the end, it was Itazan versus Fujimura's Emerald team.
From memory, that is how that first. And by the way, I said season earlier, and this wasn't called the SFL at the time. This was Rage powered by Capcom.
Right. This is not the Street Fighter League, but I think it was kind of a first running where they got some of the members of the community and some strong players together and said, hey, let's put something together and stream it and see how that goes. This was a 3-on-3 team tournament. It also was not like the US one. So what happened was it's just straight up sets with actually it was a race to points, right? It some sort of first to some number of stars, right? I think you have to get 3 stars to win. You get a star by winning a set. And I can't really remember each of these sets, all 3 people play against each other, and whoever wins, they get a star. And so I think between each of the sets, they could change the team orders. And I assume it was a blind pick. I don't know. But yeah, there was none of this. Each time you saw a set, you saw all 3 players against all 3 players. And it was really great because this is all like really top level play. So, so lots of fun. So I think that was, maybe a kind of test run for the Street Fighter League, which at Tokyo Game Show that year, Capcom announced. So I do remember that because I went to Tokyo Game Show that year. I volunteered and did some help at the JP premiere translating, and I ran some pools. That was fun. And then they announced this at the finals. Ono got up and talked about the Street Fighter League. They also, I think, announced at that same thing that there was a Type Arcade coming out. And I think people were maybe more excited for that. But
yeah, I think that news reached more people than this Street Fighter League news did. Right. I remember hearing about that coming out of TGS, and I don't specifically remember SFL coming out of TGS at the time.
Mm-hmm. Right. And so that one led into kind of the second running which was started January 2019 and went on through March. And that's the Japan Capcom Street Fighter League powered by Rage, right? So now the Capcom and Rage switched around. And then, at this one, you got the, I don't know, I wish that they had sort of looked at Quasimodox or someone else. But, this is where you got this kind of, it's maybe a fireball, but it's also maybe just a little crapped up hedgehog. It's hard to say.
Yeah, to me, it looks, you say those two keywords, it looks like how in Sonic 3 you could get a flame shield, and when you did a double jump in the air, it put fire around the Sonic the Hedgehog. And it looks like a very basic version of that. It's bad. It's not good. It's a bad design.
It's not good.
It's not good.
And I think you know what you're talking about. I've seen there's some really good designs coming out of the the Reddit Street Fighter stuff.
Hey man, Quasi, he works so fast and he works with such skill. I mean, for the people, for the rare few of you who watch the YouTube archive, because I really only keep this as a backup for the podcast. They record at the same time, so if I lose one, I'll probably have the other one. There's it's thousands to hundreds in terms of listeners, but look at the new design. You like all this cool shit? Do you like what you're looking at? Do you like what you're seeing? Quasimodox, that's right, fam. He's so good. I digress. But from what I heard, though, from what you've described in Rage powered by Capcom powered by Rage was quite a different... They had quite a different story to tell here.
Well, it was a different setup. I mean, they kept the same sort of concept of using 3-on-3 teams, but then, they really changed it up when they talked about who are the people that are getting invited to this thing, right? So the first one, it was just all pro players. It was, everyone was really very good, right? So the second run, they did something different where, and I don't think I realized this at the time, but prior to this, Capcom had been running some things called the Rookie Caravan. You might, and you probably not many people heard about this. I wrote a little bit about it, but the Rookie Caravan was Capcom going around to different places in Japan, like all over the place, in the countryside and out in, Kumamoto, up to well, maybe they weren't in Hokkaido that first run, but they're going around in different places. They bring some not local, but nationally known comedians, and they have people play Street Fighter. And it's the Rookie Caravan because, someone would win out of that, a rookie player, they say. These rookie players are all quite good, but they'd represent that area. And what happened was they took some of these, rookie players as a feed into maybe this high class area, right? There was an entire selection process for the second running or the first running of the Japan Street Fighter League, where they broke things into classes. There was an extreme class, which basically the team captains. This time it was Itabashi Zangief, right? He won the previous one. Tokido, Fudo, Mago, Daigo, and Nemo, right? So these are all really good players. They were just chosen. Don't know how they were chosen, but I suspect they're just around and they're really good. Then they had these high class players.
They had the most free time. Here you go.
Yeah, I mean they're all in Tokyo, and I think a lot of these people, there's some interplay too with Topanga and some of these other shows. And anyway, they know each other and the production and the teams that are sort of doing the fighting game side of things. So these are good people to lead stuff. Then they had a high level class, right? And there was an entire selection process for that. But at the time, the high level class had rules where the people had to be under 22 years old. And I think, maybe that was it, but they were tryout process and they were pretty good. And and
this is also no one that had a JSU license was in that class.
Yeah, no one that had a JSU license was in that class, and I don't know if that was, I don't know if there was a rule about that, but just if you're 22 and under, it's probably not likely that you're making it as a pro. If you want to know what a JSU license is, that's the Japan Esports Union. which is giving out licenses for professional games. They license out a couple of them. Street Fighter's among them. Puyo Puyo, Winning 11. There's a bunch, but only like 5 or 7. It's not like a huge number. I've written a bit about that as well. It's a way to help try to get around this thing where in Japan, you can't have a company that makes a game sponsor a tournament and give out a prize to people. There are ways around that. So like the Evo Japan didn't have any companies that were involved putting up prize money, and so they could give out prize money. It's a little strange.
But then like only up to a certain amount, it gets...
If it's over $1,000, you can't. Yeah, like under $1,000, I think it's okay.
The laws get weird is all it comes out to. And then like that is honestly a whole other conversation about like who has Jesu licenses and like what, like,
and who doesn't,
and specifically who doesn't
yes,
and why they might not have,
and also none of this licensing stuff has been tested in court. I mean, this is just a supposition that it'll work, and I don't know. Also, I looked into it and I'm like, I'm not a lawyer myself, and Japanese isn't my first language, so I'm just gonna, I'll have a base understanding, and that's good enough. So we had these high class members, none of them with Jesu licenses, and then they had a beginner class. And the beginner class, they ran a whole other series of TV shows over on, I think it was Abama TV. I wrote about that, where the beginner class was really interesting because they're, people that aren't involved in the fighting game community at all. Maybe 30, it was 18 people. Yeah, that's what it was, 18 people. About half of them were women, maybe even a little more than half. The majority of them were comedians or models of some kind, so people that are photogenic. I think the oldest person was maybe 33 or 34. It was a comedian that played Birdie, and he didn't get too far. But, what Capcom is trying to do there is, they talked to talent agencies in Japan and said, hey, we're going to run this show. Are there people that are interested in doing this stuff? And the talent agencies are interesting. You might know of Yoshimoto. Yoshimoto is a team that sponsors some people, particularly Jobin, right? Jobin, I think, is maybe, and maybe Machibo's Yoshimoto now. I forget exactly. But Yoshimoto is a talent agency that basically has a bunch of comedians and actors, and they opened up a esports department because they think that's going to get big and they want to have esports talents. And so there's a couple other talent agencies that have esports divisions. And so Capcom, I think, said, hey, let's invite some people that are photogenic and know their way around a camera and that are interested in gaming, right? All these people, they had an interview process and they talk about what they like. And, they were all interested in gaming, and a bunch of them, played Street Fighter with their dad growing up and stuff. So,
right.
People but I think it's a way
already charismatic, right?
Absolutely. Like, their talent is more on the end of being in front of a camera and being, charismatic. And then, we'll teach them how to play Street Fighter, right? And I think this is very interesting because, fighting games can appeal to a lot of different people. But we, should try to make the case for that, right? Nintendo might have it a bit easier with Smash, where people already love Mario and play Mario, right? And then they say, oh, here's Mario in this other game. Let me go play that. And then, there's a way to transition into that. If you're not into Street Fighter, you probably don't know these characters, right? So I think a really interesting part
outside of like the original Street Fighter 2 had some real big fucking pull in terms of how important it is to like culture in general.
Yeah, but we're old now. Come on, Joe.
I don't know. I still think it does. They put a Zangief in a Wreck-It Ralph movie. Consider that. That's all I have to say.
I'm pretty sure a Dirty Zangief main is like on the writing staff, right? I mean, it's not like the kids in the elementary school are saying, "Man, I really want to see Zangief."
Fair enough.
It's but I think it's really
a good point because it's like Mike Tyson just found out like last week that Balrog was, or I'm sorry, actually M. Bison in Japan was based on him.
Right.
I feel like that's not true. I'm pretty sure like fucking who was his oh god damn it, my boxing knowledge. Who was his promoter?
Don King?
Don King. I'm pretty sure Don King knew who the fuck that character was based on. He probably just didn't give a fuck.
Maybe.
But again, I think it has some sway. But you're right, though. It's not something that, even if you know the characters, getting into the community and getting into fighting games in general is not easy to do.
Right. So they had, these three classes, and the beginner class, these people were really, so I'm not going to say they were terrible. They were not excellent. I myself am a dirty casual. I'm god awful. I at one point got my Zangief up to platinum. Now I'm stuck in gold because I decided, I'd better learn a real character, and I learned to use Rashid, got me down to like rookie again, and I could only get up to silver with him. So, I'm not very good. But I could tell, sort of watching the whole selection process for these rookies, that they're not super good. Like, they weren't able to block jump-ins, right? Like, they didn't know how to block, right? That's the first thing. But you could tell as they were going through the selection process, they're getting better. And so then finally, when we get to the Japan SFL, we've got these three strata, right? We've got the Daigo level people, the mid-level class people, which are like, those are people that are going to your locals and basically winning the locals, right? So like some of the people that got into that from the mid-level class were consistently winning at the Akihabara weekly local, or at the Cyclops basement local on coming out of Osaka. I think Sakugami. He wins there frequently enough. So they're quite good, right? Like they definitely would, diamond or super diamond, or I don't even know what's above that because I'm only platinum, right? I don't know. So they're quite good. But the beginner class were really bad. And I think, one of the focuses that this Street Fighter League had was on sort of learning and using these other people to teach the beginner class members some real basics. And the way that the scoring worked for this is the extreme class would play the extreme class, and that's worth 3 points for the winner. Mm-hmm. The high level class would play the high level class, and that's worth 2 points for the winner. And the beginner class would play the beginner class, and that's worth 1 point for the winner. And then the team, with the most points wins. You might say, well, Doc, I know that if the extreme class wins, that's 3. But what if they lose the other 2? Because that gives 3 points as well. And what do you do if there's a tie? Right?
What do you do if there's a tie?
Yeah, that might be a problem.
Math sometimes works against you.
Yeah, that might be a problem. Then they have the extreme class played out again, so it's not like a super nothing super crazy there.
Well, wasn't there like extra stakes added to that though?
They do that. Well, so they do have this final act thing, which was if one team ran away and they won 3-0.
That's what I'm thinking. It's the time of tears or something.
Yes,
like
the time of crying final
Yes.
act, which was if a team ran it out 3-0, then the extreme class, the middle level class, the high level player, could optionally play the pro player on the other team, and if they win a 1-2, then they win the whole thing. Or not the whole thing. They win 3 victory points.
Right.
Right. Or they could choose the beginner, and if the beginner wins and I said 1-2, I meant a regular battle with 2 rounds. With the beginner, it was just 1 round. Like whoever wins just a single round match,
they can scrub it out. Yeah,
they can scrub it out, which is really funny. And so they had like this interesting rule there where where they had this time of crying. And that came up a couple times, and down near the end, Fuda was like, our team was losing, so we had to intentionally throw things to get to this crying act, because, if we won that, then we could actually get 3 victory points, which would make our total enough to put us up into the 3rd spot to move on. And, a bunch of rules lawyering here that I think Ultra David would be proud of.
Right. Like that can lead to some fun. I imagine that could lead to some funny situations.
Yeah, there was some funny things coming out of that. But yeah, so this first run of the Street Fighter League had these 3 different classes, and the play only happened between the 3 different classes, and there were no character bans. So what it really was, there was some discussion, when they talked to the team captains about this, they sort of sat down and said, oh yeah, if you go and add up all the points, even if the captain wins like every round, every battle. Another team where maybe the beginner wins all the battles and the captain wins half of the time, they're going to end up with more points in the end. And so there was a big focus on trying to make sure that the beginner class people could improve. And I like that this sort of sequence ran over 2 months from January to March. So exactly like what happened with the U.S. Street Fighter League, as far as I know.
Well, well, yeah, that's funny that you said "as far as I know," because they would have you believe that it was filmed over the course of that amount of time, where really it was all done over a single weekend, or like a week or something. It might have been a week. I have to.
Yeah, that's a real shame, because one of the things I really enjoyed about this this running in JP was that, week over week, you could see that the beginner players were improving, and almost for every segment they had between the two teams, each team got a beginning sort of like 3-minute video sequence, and usually they'd cover, training that the teams were doing, and say, okay, here your opponent in this one is Blanca, so you should really learn how to punish, a Blanca ball or something.
That kind of makes sense too, because then you have a lot more time for lead up in terms of production, like pre-production, that you could have before the actual like show part airs.
Yeah, absolutely. The shows were definitely, filmed in advance and edited and then streamed out. But the production was very good. They would do these things. You'd see them do the training. And I really liked that, because I would spend time on my blog. I'd look at, okay, what things were they focusing on the training? And then I'd go back and see, how many times did the person anti-air, right? Like if the focus was anti-airing or something. And I thought that was super interesting. And you could see them getting better.
Yeah. It gives insight into how a pro would want to teach a new or already skilled player.
Right, absolutely. And actually, I looked at that too. So the pros often, they often had segments where they say, okay, with Kawano, right? Oh, Kawano, he's a strong Colleen, he was in this thing, right? Mm-hmm. I'm talking off the top of my head. I might get this wrong, but there was a player that is well known now that was, an Anman. Shuto was in this for sure too. The pro players would tell them to focus on one thing. And for the life of me, I watch a lot of Street Fighter. I had a very hard time seeing, improvements in the high level players. Like, to me, I'm like, oh, they're very good. And then, like, oh, maybe they did something a little bit different. They're still really good. But you could see a big difference in the beginner class. Right. And I wanted to see with the U.S. League, I was kind of excited to see what happens when you ban a pro player's main or a very good player's main character. They aren't known for having a secondary. I would love to see how they improve week over week. And I assume it would be a much faster process than this was with the beginner class. Yeah. And something I was looking forward to seeing. And I didn't really get to see it so much.
Yeah, because you would have Idom get that Laura band, and then he would try Birdie, because you can try Birdie. He's pretty easy to pick up. He has pretty strong matchups. You could try him. And then, like, I guess you could see there was, like, a little bit of improvement of his Birdie over the course of those couple days. Because you could tell he would, like, go at night and probably grind out session with Birdie. Which, like, also to him as a pro player is, like, that doesn't necessarily help him, because he's not going to pick Birdie in a CPT event ever. That's not going to happen. He's going to stick with Laura. But it could have been interesting to see him branch out over a longer period of time and see if, like, there is something there. Maybe that he does have, like, a pocket character that he can go to and, maybe make up for Laura's bad matchups. You never know.
Well, I'm curious to talk about that, because one of the things I think, these are, in the end, entertainment for viewers, right? And you want to make an appealing product for the audience. And so what is it that you want to see? For myself, I am kind of interested to see, okay, how does a pro player who puts a lot of time into these things and is very good at fighting games, how well can they adapt, and how quickly can they change? And I think that would be a really amazing process to watch, to see. But, if that's what the U.S. Street Fighter League was aiming for, like, I don't think they set it up so that they could show off that strength. No. I think the idea of a ban is interesting. I like it when you have rules that make you think tactically and how to apply that. But I think the way practically it turned out was that, you'd always ban, Laura. Although Mikey made it interesting, and at some points you'd think, okay, well, if you got some other player who's really strong, maybe you'd want to ban them too. But that's just kind of luck of the draw that happened on that team.
It got a little monotonous and expected. Like, you'd been Karen for Punk, or Bison for Toy. It just became pretty rote and didn't it didn't have a story to tell at that point, because then it's just them playing a weaker character. Hey, maybe they'll take around, but I'd have to look at the stats. I don't know if many of those character specialists won any of those sets. I'd have to go back and look, though.
I think that the U.S. Street Fighter League had some idea of trying to build, some themes into their groupings, right? So they took the captains were people ranked high on the Capcom Pro Tour leaderboard. That makes sense. And then they said we have a class of people that are fan voted in, right? And then another class was what was the third group?
Online tournaments.
Online tournament winners. That's right. So there's some groupings there. But I think in all of those cases, you're kind of just getting people who are good at Street Fighter to varying degrees.
Right.
And I'm just, it's interesting to think of. I think in the Japan case for this first season, they had a very different idea of what are the people they're going to get to take part in this and what they're trying to show the audience, right? So we have pro level players who are, we know they're very good. We have high-level pro-am players. These are maybe the up-and-coming people, which is why they had that, hey, you're under 22 years old. That's an important part of it. These really are up-and-coming. They're young. And Japan is trying to get more young people into the game. And then we had this class of here's sort of the everyman character that you at home can sympathize with. And I think a lot of people could be like, oh, I'm better than them. And you can... But it's still interesting because you can see this sort of progression of improvement. And I think, Capcom in Japan trying to reach out to a broader audience is really, really interesting. And I like that they had that thought there. I
think you bring up a good point. Just something that makes me think about, and I hadn't really thought about this until you laid things out like that, in terms of there's this group of pro players in Japan, and it's this very select group. It's only a couple more than 6 players. I mean, there's a bunch of talent out of Japan, but then you look at the way that the U.S. has run things with the SFL, and it's like, here's your 6 captains based on their standings in the CPT. Then we have the online tournaments, then community voting. But also, when you look at all of the players who are involved in all of this, if you look at like last season, Dual Kevin, right? He made it in community. I think he was community voted in. I'd have to go back and look at this, but regardless, it wasn't in this. Now, season 2, he's a captain because he has the most CPT points, right? Like, the breadth of skill that we're looking at here isn't like their other classes. They are pretty much everyone involved in the SFL and the USA version of it is pretty much pro level on that skill level. So there aren't necessarily discrete skill levels between the 3 classes. I mean, Justin Wong's Justin Wong, right? Like, you're not going to have, he's talented in a bunch of different characters and he's just insanely skilled. But at the same time, like, no one had a 100% win rate. Not a single person. So
I think they could have done with the people who are online tournament winners, just to make it more natural for them. They could have installed a lag switch in there and then got Lee Chung to come by with one of his Tims to kick it every once in a while. That would have put them back in their natural U.S. habitat.
By the way, one lag switch to activate during this round, but it only goes to your online tournament winner.
But the online in Japan is really good. I've only played ranked matches in Japan. It's great, no problem. People complain a lot in the U.S. and I don't have a machine out here to play with, so I don't know what it's like. But
the internet's. I would argue that you do if you go to the arcades, but that's kind of a different story. It's kind of a different situation because you're only attached to other arcade machines, but.
I don't see the reason to play Street Fighter V in the arcades when you get a better experience at home. And if you want to play outside of your house, go to the place where they serve beer and you can chat with people too.
Which you cannot do in Shinjuku. Got kicked out real fast for that one. They don't let you do it. What the fuck? Anyway, that's another story for another time. But so they set this up. They run it. How did things end up?
Well, let's see. That's a good question. I did write up a whole bunch about this, and I tried to up my game by including more pictures and putting in some videos. And
Yeah, there
so
were highlights.
I really liked. They had great takes between the players, and Ayako Hata was back and interviewing people. And there was, great moments between Nemo and Itazan, because those teams played against each other a bit. So I put some translated videos in there. I'm really shit at video editing, but that happened. So you can check some of that out. But if I recall correctly, the winner was in fact Itabashi Zangief. I think someone's got a Nerf Geef. What? What are we gonna do?
No, but wasn't he playing Abigail at the time?
Yeah, it was almost entirely Abigail. Much to my chagrin.
Yeah. But now isn't he back to Abigail? He's not full Zangief mode even in this season.
Yeah, no, he's still switching off between Abigail and Zangief, and playing a bit more Abigail than I would like to see, but that's just me. His team that for that running, by the way, was Itabashi Zangief, a Fang player called Mochan, who was a lot of fun to watch. He was a lot of fun to watch. And then he had a Ken player who was just kind of crazy, Kimura Keita, absolute crazy guy, but also quite fun to watch. The second team,
he was the player that everyone wanted on their team from that.
No, he wasn't. So the player that everyone,
player? Oh, I'm sorry then.
Everyone wanted on their team a guy named Kunisada Ryosuke, an Ed player. Who was just clearly better than everyone else. He had combos. He could block jump ins. He figured out how to V reversal like halfway through the rookie thing, and yeah, he was really good. He won, I think, all but 2 of his matches. Kimura Keita was just a kind of plucky guy who at the rookie sort of draft thing, he said, "And Itazan, I want to be on your team." It just seemed like a completely ridiculous guy, and I can't believe Itabashi chose him, but he did. And he was actually quite good.
He likes gamble. He likes gamble.
Yeah. He's a gambler. Yeah, he was quite good. I think the number 2 team that made it to the grand finals was Nemo's Aurora. So for me, this was great. We saw lots of Itabashi and Nemo interaction. Nemo's team was quite good. The high class player was Anman Urian. He changed his name he got sponsored and changed his name to Shuto, which is his actually family name. So Shuto Urian, if you see him around, came from this. And then the beginner class was Okamura Mami. She's an actress maybe, or a model. I wasn't aware of her work before she joined us, because I don't think she has a huge body of work. She won the best smile contest for a hotel chain. That's, I think, the biggest thing I could find. She played.
By the way, folks, if you're not haven't caught the drift of the Japanese TV and entertainment is vastly differently run how U.S. entertainment industry is run. You'll have a lot more people who are just a commentator for what?
Or just people that are famous because they're famous and they're pretty and they can talk. And
right.
They make jokes.
Who were the people who commentated on the side during Iron Chef? Who are they really?
Yeah.
They're just talking head. And there's just a lot of that. But that's just how game shows work in Japan versus how TV is run. It's a different world, folks, but that's where some of these people came from.
Yeah. So Okamura Mami, she, started with Cammy, changed to Blanca, and still is playing Blanca, doing a lot of stuff with video games. She does a lot of the streams for the Japanese CPT. So she'll go overnight with Nanai or one of the other commentators, and they'll comment from 3 a.m. to 12 the next day on verse fighting or something.
Damn.
So she's a lot of fun. The other thing that was just a whole bunch of entertainment for me was this guy Nagashima Pineapple, who's a comedian. He's part of a comedy duo, and he got picked by Daigo, and Daigo is just hilarious in all of these things. At for the draft, all of the beginners, the captains could choose people to play against each other, and then they based on that, ostensibly choose the strongest person.
Right.
Daigo was asking people, where do you live? Because he wanted someone that lived in Tokyo, so that they could like go out drinking and stuff. And then they asked, why did you choose Nagashima Pineapple? He's a Rashid, he's okay. And Daigo's like, I thought it'd be fun to drink with him. and Nagashima Pineapple turned out to be very good, and they had a couple videos where Daigo and them were out drinking. And so just Daigo is a hilarious guy. Again, follow FGC Translated. He puts a bunch of Daigo things up there.
Yeah, it's made FGC Translated has made me turn on Daigo in a lot of ways, because when you see Daigo interact with like situations where he's comfortable, like Daigo in interviews, he's a terrible interviewer. He's like the worst person to interview. Is boring as fuck, bland answers the whole way through. It's vanilla all the way down. But you get him talking to like a stream or interacting with a stream where it's just him kind of let loose, Daigo unchained. There's something there. Like it's been really nice to have those translations out there, or even have translations like the one you did of like this journey through the SFL, which has been quite fun to see that side of things.
I like to stick to long form things, but there's all sorts of stuff out there, and I think it's great when we can get more information out and about. And I am probably the least of the people that do anything in Japan. Like, you should definitely be following Giuna and Majin Obama and people like that. They actually do stuff like organize things and make stuff happen, which is super useful for the community. But I guess we should talk a little bit about the upcoming season for the Japan Street Fighter League. It's changed again. It's a little bit different. I have some graphics. They released a graphic of how they're doing the selection for people this time, and they're continuing. I think this breakdown into different classes. So they have again Jesu Pro licensed captains, and they have a pool of Jesu Pro license holders that they'll pull from. But then they have a whole bunch of feeder systems to get into that. And one of those is the arcade league, right? So Street Fighter V Type Arcade came out this year, last year, I don't know, it came out recently. And what they did is they said, okay, we're going to have 30 arcades around the country, and each of these 30 arcades are going to run a 3-on-3 tournament. And the winner from each of those arcades, one team will win for the arcade, and then those teams will go into a playoffs, which is actually coming up at the end of the month. I have some information about it, where 3 teams will come out of those playoffs and go into the tryout pool. So that's really interesting. We're running, competitions around 30 locations in Japan, all over the place, of teams, of real local teams. So you get this feel of a really local flavor of different, communities coming together. And they've been running these all month through July, and people have been really interested in it, really, having a lot of fun with it. And even there have been some teams traveling around. So, Takeuchi John, like I forget which team he was on, but they traveled kind of like, 2 hours out to Ibaraki to get a win at one of the arcades out there. It was him and some other people. So that's kind of interesting.
That is cool.
And those are still going on. There's going to be a finals. I think it's on the 27th. I could check. I have it all written down, but
no one here. Very few people, I would say, if not 0 people who are listening to this show, would be available to compete in that tournament.
Yeah. Well, I think the thing is that I'm interested in is I believe they're going to stream the finals for that, which should be quite interesting.
At some point.
In fact, it is going to be streamed on the arcade on the 28th on Twitch at Capcom Fighters JP.
Oh, okay.
So
I was going to guess OpenRec, but there you go. That's on
Capcom Fighters. So that was the one source that they had pulling people in, is the arcade league. The other thing they're doing is to continue this idea of young people. They have a college. They had a college tournament, and that was limited to college people. And in fact, Okamura Mami and let's see if I can find her team. Okamura Mami joined up with I think it was Colino. But basically the college is limited to college people, and they had, again, different colleges. So each team, represented a college, and then they had a playoffs, and those happened, not too long ago. It was
basically
back
like a
on
school
the
versus like a school rival.
school versus school. Yeah, I mean, actually, the people could come from different colleges, but they had to be in a college. And so back on the 22nd, June 22nd and 15th, they had a playoff for that. That was all done online, and we got a winner that came out of that. So one team of 3 people came out of this college. This college tournament.
Right.
And then there's one final source that they pull from, which is this Rookies Caravan that I talked about that travels around the country. And they run Street Fighter things there. Those are all individual Street Fighter tournaments, but it's really interesting. They usually have like a pro player. I think the one that happened last weekend, maybe Hatsume was in it, but Storm Kubo or Nemo or Itabashi, like all these people will go out, and then they'll pair them up with a talent person, a comedian or an MC or an actor, and they have playoffs.
I kind of like that.
They have tournaments there that represent the different regions. So there's 6 of those. 6 teams come out of the 6 Rookies Caravans, and then they fight in a East versus West, right? So like East Coast, West Coast thing, where the 2 winning teams, 2 teams will come out of that and go into the tryout. So we've got a big draft pool of I don't know, people coming from the arcade, from the college, from Rookies Caravan, and then also into that draft pool go 6 Jesu Pro license holders. So that draft pool ends up being 24 people that gets whittled down to 12 people that are actually selected for the 6 teams. And it's just going to be interesting to see how that happens. I haven't seen information on how they're going to do the teams, if they're going to do, separate into different class levels, or if they're going to do a Pokemon style tournament, where they, or a Waseda or whatever they do. I don't know what the score is going to be. That hasn't been announced, but
yeah, it seems like they've opened it up a little bit more this year in terms of skill levels. So it might not make sense to do a beginner level, rookie level, pro level.
Right, I think so. The people that come out of the arcade, for example, like those people are like super good. Like Takeuchi John is they he had a team that won one of those things. MOV is on a team. I forget, MOV's team was just ridiculous.
Right.
Let me see if.
But I mean, point of it is though, it's a little bit more contentious this time around for the second season of SFL in Japan.
Yeah, so it's maybe they won't do that same thing where they split the teams up into levels, but I'm curious to see what they do. I think they're continuing to try to experiment to try to find something that's interesting. But I really did like what they did last year with the different levels of people. But we'll see. I think it's always good to try new stuff and to see what works out.
Yeah.
So
it'll be interesting to see what comes out of it, and hopefully Daigo can get a team that's all in Tokyo, so we can get like a camera inside of a bar that.
Well, it's almost positive that all of this stuff is going to run over Tokyo, because if you're in Japan, at worst you're like 2 hours away from Tokyo, and it's not that far. If you fly from,
could be costly.
Nah, yeah, it's not that bad though. Like $100 to. Anyway, I'm pretty sure that the organizers fair. Would pay for the flights out and stuff.
Right,
but
that's almost certainly true. Yeah,
it's also pretty likely that a lot of your people are going to be in Tokyo already. So that's just what happens.
It's a pretty big city.
Yeah, 24 million people in it. Yeah. So okay, so I think that's what we know about the upcoming JP Street Fighter League, and I'm curious to see how that goes. And I'll probably write something about it unless someone else does. It'd be great if someone else did. I think once or twice I was able to watching the US Street Fighter League. It's great because I don't have to take notes. I don't have to go back over it a second time. I understand what people say.
Don't have to do like full translations of what people said and do like basically transcriptions. No, that would be if only you could pass the buck, honestly.
Right.
No, but that's cool to see how things have been run differently in Japan versus how things have been run in the U.S. Like how things have been run over time, like what pools they even pull from. And it also seems like that. You know what it sounds like? It sounds like there were a lot more resources put into the Japanese SFL than there have been for the US SFL. Like, in terms of the lead up even, right? Because for season 2 of the SFL was basically CEO happened and they said, season 2 is happening tomorrow. And then tomorrow came around and like they weren't actually ready. They didn't have everything ready until like late Tuesday. So like I don't know if the same amount of resources are being put into the SFL season 2. However, we haven't really seen how it's we haven't seen it come about in terms of when they go to film it. Again, I believe it'll be over a week kind of thing. But I guess I should go over who is part of it that we know of right now. So again, I'll say we're recording this on the 19th. So voting is open for the community voting for that. So you can go to the Smash GG page right now. I'll probably include that in the show notes because where else are you going to find it? Honestly, it's not like it's posted anywhere else. But the team captains are pulled from the top performers in the CPT. So if you look at the US overall, that puts, well, also carry over the last two. So you have Punk and Knuckledew. You also have 801 Strider. You have Smug. Dual Kevin, who was a community voted player from last year, now makes top 8 at CEO and is number 2, or well, I say number 5. And the 6th person could be CJ Truth or Terrence. At this point, we don't know because the points are the same there. So it's like a toss-up, right? Then we look at the online tournaments. So if you look at the players who've carried over from that, it's Shine and JB. But then Samurai won a online tournament, so he's back in it. IDOM won an online tournament, so he's back in it. You also have Mojo, who's a extremely strong Mika player, and Dankadelis, who is he's kind of like a G main now. He's G and Dulcim. Then for community players, you have Broly Legs as a carryover and Rob TV as a carryover. So right now there's 4 more players up for grabs here. There's going to be a whole new round of selecting players, so it's going to be team shakeups from before. There'll be a whole new thing, but that's kind of the setup for SFL Season 2 USA.
And we have to vote for the community people, right?
Yes.
Do we have only one vote?
Yes, you only have one vote.
Because there's a lot of people I want to vote for.
There's a lot of people on that list. There's a lot of good videos out there. There's a lot of good stuff. There's a lot of players who I would. The funny thing is about this is that I feel like season 2 of this, a lot more old guard, more popular Street Fighter players have come to the table for this community voting and been like, hey, like, let me wield my giant sword of followers on twitter.com and say, hey, I feel like they're doing a little bit more work to maybe swing the vote in their direction. Who can say? I don't know if it'll pay out for them because I mean, who's actually going and vote? Like, I would have to look at how many people actually vote over time. It's a whole thing that has me very confused about the entire process. But I don't know. We might get some weird results in season 2. You might see a flow, for example, in season 2. I wouldn't be surprised. But I don't know. There's a lot of very worthwhile players up for the vote. Who can say?
Absolutely. And there's only so it looks like there's going to be 6 from the online and 6 from the community. Mm-hmm. So that means when they're choosing the teams, there's everyone gets chosen, right? So that was one thing from the JP League that they had double the number of people in the candidate pool.
Yeah.
From what actually got chosen, which, you can go either way, but I think that did provide a bit of drama and some, tension in terms of when, you're doing the draft, do people even make it in or not?
Yeah, they make the cut. Here, there is already a cut, and then when draft day happens, it's a snake draft, goes both ways, and now you have to have a player so how it works is it's one player from CPT ranking, one player from online, and one player from the community vote. You have to have a representation of one of three on your team. So that's just the other kink in the, at least that's what I believe. Those rules haven't necessarily been laid out, but that's my assumption.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But okay. Other than that, all I have left are assumptions as to how it will run. I would imagine that it's gonna. Here's like worst case scenario in my mind is that it's run the exact same way. All of the ruling that has been laid out in the Smash GG looks like it's probably going to be the same. Now that doesn't necessarily carry over to like when they go to film it, but it's just one. I saw a lot of people clamoring for we want different rules in terms of who can be banned or like number of bans or like and there could be interesting rules there, right? You could switch it up a little bit.
It would be nice if they would let us know what the rules are, though, because from my point of view as a viewer, I get to vote for who goes in, and if I know what the rules are, that informs who I want to choose, right? So I don't know if you saw, this guy Alex Myers, right, a Kami user. He reminded me that he also plays Sakura. So, that's if there's a good chance that Kami gets banned, then, maybe I want to vote in people that I know have at least two players to play, or maybe I want to grief them and vote in people that are just specialists, right? Mm-hmm. I don't know, but I mean, it'd be nice to know the full set of rules if I get to take part in some of this voting. It'd be a shame, like in American political elections, if they let you vote, but they don't tell you what party the candidates are or something. It seems like you want as much information as possible if you're gonna. Yeah,
honestly, I just wish the candidates would tell you what their policies are.
That'd be helpful.
That's a fucking rarity. But anyway, weird digression there. But I think that lines up. I think that tracks. Who knows where your vote is going? I would say vote for a specialist. I would say vote for a specialist and kind of because that in my mind creates the most fun situation.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think that some specialists maybe have been trying to hedge their bets. I watch. I don't know if you know. There's a online locals run, on the East Coast, and I like this guy Mike Too Strong. I come for the Zangief, but lately he's been playing Akuma. So
yeah, he switches to. It's funny to watch him play Akuma, and like the specific way that he plays Akuma is very Zangief-like. It's very Zangief-esque. Yeah. It's funny talking to him about that because he's like, I feel like my Zangief sucks now, and I'm just like, my guy, just stick to the Zangief. Be the Zangief in your own heart.
But I think that does bring up a point that it's important what Capcom is trying to say with these shows, right? Because if Capcom is saying if you're playing Street Fighter, you really need to know how to play multiple characters, and that's kind of what they're saying with this Inception.
I mean, I feel like that is a correct way to look at the game, but also not. Here's where I'm dichotomous on this. Here's my double think on this one, is that I think at a base, like a core level, it is easy to learn a different character. It is easy to go in and like learn the combos, the setups, and you can understand a character fairly quickly, especially if you are already playing at a very high level, because then it's like, well, I can just remember defensive options versus this character. I kind of know already where they're probably going to want to play from and apply that to the matchup that you're currently playing with a different character. You can do that. But then the other side of my brain switches on and says, but because it's easy to learn characters, what actually becomes very hard is the like very discrete minutia of like, well, are you standing this far away or this far away? Which is like a very small difference, right? Like, you can't see this, but I'm holding my fingers very, very close together, where there's like very small differences of how you would approach a matchup with a character versus another character, and how that would affect, like, the knowledge that you have to have on that level in Street Fighter V, I think is very high, even though at a base level, how to learn to play a character might be lower on the terms of what you need to know. So I don't know. Maybe that's what they're trying to say, but I don't necessarily know if that stacks up. I don't know.
Yeah.
Street Fighter V is a weird game at this point.
I really love character specialists. There's nothing I love more than seeing Itabashi go in with Zangief and beat a Dalsim or a Menat. But then, you also can say, well, maybe you just don't use Zangief against those two characters, right?
If he's trying to win, why would he play that character?
So I don't know. It's interesting to see sort of what the rules are, and I think that Capcom might not intentionally be trying to say something, but if they make this an attractive thing for the community to get into, there's a prize pool and more exposure, then it might drive how the players who are up and coming, decide what they play and how they do it. Mm-hmm. I'm just a dirty casual. I'm just going to stick to having fun, and sometimes that means I lose with Zangief. Sometimes it means I lose with Rashid or with Falk. But either way, it's fun.
And that's fine. That is one thing that people forget sometimes, is that fighting games are fun. Like, at the end of the day, like, if you're in this and not having fun, you've fucked up along the way at some point. You've lost the path. I mean, like, there are parts where, like, you might be disheartened and not, like, having, like, capital F fun, but at the end of the day, come on, man. It's a game we like to play. It's a genre that is, at its core, fun. But so that's kind of all the US SFL information that I have. I think we've covered this topic pretty thoroughly, unless there's anything else that's going on in Japan, SFL wise, or just in general, that you want to bring up before we sunset this episode.
Well, I've listened to this podcast quite a bit. I think we're probably about at the time limit. There's all sorts of stuff in Japan, but I don't think there's time to go into that stuff.
I mean, could you give like an abridged quick rundown of could you bring up a list of things where you're like, here's a bunch of links that you can link in the show notes that people should go look for if they are interested in what the fighting game community looks like in Japan?
Right. I wonder, I don't know. I write a little bit about that stuff. One of the things I talked about, recently was there was just the 200th running of the Fighters Crossover Akiba. That's the local weekly held at Akihabara Esports Square. Mm-hmm. That's run by a guy named Kagechi. And it's really interesting. So we did 200 of these things, and he talked a lot about sort of the evolution of that event and some of the economics behind it, and the numbers of people. Like, it's only been growing, right? I don't think we have problems with that. So I have a blog post about that somewhere that I thought I had put in the notes. But if not, I will do that. I've already mentioned that you should follow FGC Translated. I don't know how that account does it. They translate a lot of stuff, and it's really interesting. They're going through a lot of streams. Mm-hmm. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, the breadth of things that they pull from has been really interesting, and also the rate of which they're putting information out there is cool. Yep.
I don't know if people have been have know about Hatsume. She's a Kami player, a pro player that sort of travels around, and she has some really nice vlogs, some nice vlogs up on YouTube. I don't know what it is about Kami players and vlogs, but if you look at Alex Myers, I think he does like really good stuff about traveling around, and he does his own editing, and it's quite well done. But I think you might want to take a look at. She has a vlog up about the 2018 Taiwan Major that has some English subtitles, and it's just fun to watch her because she travels along with the other Japanese, pros. But a lot of her stuff is just kind of like, wow, this is cool. I'm traveling the world and playing fighting games. So I think that's a fun account.
A different perspective, a more like a joyous gamer perspective.
Right. Another person that's fun to watch and does stuff in Japan is Guilty, right? So she used to be, I think, a St. Louis person.
Yes.
I met her out in Akihabara. She's a lot of fun. She just recently put on a Mortal Kombat 11 event at a heavy metal bar in Shibuya, which was super cool.
That's kind of wild to think like people in Japan are playing Mortal Kombat at all.
I mean, not many people do. You can't get it with a Japanese account, so you have to have like a U.S. PlayStation account because it's too gory.
She's on the inside. She's got well, I brought my U.S. PS4 over here, playing my dirty U.S. games.
That's right. So yeah, I don't think not many people are playing Mortal Kombat really out here. I think Tachikawa, if you know him. Colleen, Street Fighter player, DBFZ mostly right now. He's also been doing some Mortal Kombat 11, but I think it's really cool that Guilty's ran this event at a heavy metal bar, which sort of fits right in with the NRS Mortal Kombat sort of stuff.
That Venn diagram is almost one circle.
Yep. If you do come to Japan, hit me up. I'm happy to sort of tell you about here are some locals to go to, but particularly I think if you want to see some of the best action in the world, go to Tuesday, Fighting Tuesday, sort of run by Giuna and Majin Obama. They got Tekken 7, DBFZ, Soul Calibur 6 out there, and that's officially sponsored by Bandai Namco. I like the Wednesday night local at Akihabara Esports Square. Red Bull Gaming does a lot of great stuff for the community. Shout outs to them for that. They run on Thursday night a Street Fighter local, usually this Level Up Thursday, and sometimes they do a Jikoken TV sort of filming that Fudo is usually involved in. And there's a bunch of locals that are focused on beginner to intermediate players, at least 2 that I know of. So Shogepi runs one, and the Sport Near Corp runs another. But if you are going to stop by, feel free to hit me up, and I'll point you out to some fun locals to go to. And if you come by Wednesday night at the Akihabara Esports Square, let's get a drink.
Cool.
I'm better at that than I am at Street Fighter, but I'll definitely put a pretty bad Zangief up against whatever you have.
Hey, cheers to that. I'm a much better drinker than I am a Street Fighter player. That's pretty good. All right, man. That's quite a bit of information. There's a lot to chew on there for people. Hopefully they've enjoyed this episode, and I know I've had fun listening to the stories of the origin story of the SFL and kind of where things have come from and where we are now. But I can't let you go. You know, I've got to ask you 2 questions. I cannot let you leave this show without answering these 2 questions, which I think play into the way that people answer these. I think can tell a lot about someone's character, what they're thinking in their darkest of hearts. And this question comes in 2 parts. First part: what is your favorite normal attack in any fighting game, and why?
Well, so I've only really played Capcom fighters. Never liked sort of when Final Fight or Fatal Fury came out, sort of the SNK style. Like, what is this jerky, low frame rate stuff? So I'm a Capcom guy. But my favorite normal attack has got to be T-Hawk's jumping jab in the air.
Ooh, okay.
It's just the best. I haven't played that game for a long time. Every once in a while, I boot it up and play around. I just remember it just looks like a triangle. That whole thing,
yeah,
and
it's a very pointed look to it. It's very When you said that move, what came to my mind was sharp. That's a sharp jump and attack.
It's active forever. Mm-hmm. You jump in and then they blocked it. This is great. Are we going to go for a ride? We going for a Mexican typhoon? Are we going to do a standing short and then a Mexican typhoon? What are we going to do? Oh, it leads into so much fun stuff. But I just love that move. Or in Ultra Street Fighter 4, I also liked T-Hawk's jumping strong, which whiffs on crouching opponents. Mm-hmm. Or doesn't have a hit for those guys, so you can use that, and then they block because they're like, oh, he's attacking, but no, I'm actually taking you for a ride.
Yeah, it also activates your block, your guard.
Proximity guard?
Yeah, proximity guard.
Yeah.
I had a blank there, thanks. Yeah, which is like an interesting thing that can lead to fun situations, and it keeps them in the same spot. No, that's cool. I dig it. Those are good. I think you're the only person who's come on this show and named a jumping attack as their favorite normal. I think I'd have to go back and check the logs, but that's an interesting little different take that I don't think we've heard on the show before. So along those lines, I have to ask you the part 2. What is your favorite combo in any fighting game, and why?
Well, again, I'm also old and very bad with my hands. So for me, combo is kind of like if you have 4 hits in a combo, that is amazing. because I grew up with Street Fighter 2, the World Warrior.
That's a big combo. 4 hits. That's a big combo.
4 hits was huge. Yeah, I actually cannot really do any combos, but so I have 2 answers. So the combo that I'm kind of most proud of that I can do right now is jump in Street Fighter 5 with Zangief, jumping fierce, and then a headbutt, and then a jab, and then a lariat. I'm very proud that I can do that because when I first started playing fighting games, I never intentionally studied anything. I didn't know what a lab was. All of this stuff was foreign to me. And so, when I first started Street Fighter 5, I heard about, bread and butter combos and stuff. And then I found one for Zangief, and I'm like, wow, that's 4 hits. That's going to be tough. But I figured it out, and I could do it. So that just talks to how bad I am. But I think, one of the things I really, really love and miss, and I haven't been able to recapture this feeling, is back in Street Fighter 2, any of those incarnations, when you can get an opponent to block your roundhouse with Ryu and chain that into a fireball. Man, I just love that. Where you got that, you're doing that sweep, and then suddenly, oh nope, I'm doing a Hadouken, and you've got to block this thing, and you're moving across the screen, and now you're back far away from me.
Yeah,
and,
it did so much pushback. You're right. That is an interesting thing that it was like. I mean, that's not a thing in what Street Fighter has become these days. To cancel, man, God, could you imagine if Ryu could cancel a sweep in Street Fighter 5?
I try to play around, and I still, I don't. It's been a while, but I still don't feel like he has that sort of range where you used to poke with some low attack and get it into that fireball just to have them block it to get your range back and settle back into neutral.
Yeah.
But I just love the whole feeling of that roundhouse to the fireball. It just felt so good.
Mm-hmm. No, yeah, I agree. That's funny. That's interesting. Again, that's another interesting take because I think you're the only person who's listed a quote unquote combo that is technically a block string.
Yeah, a very bad block string. Yeah.
Very funny. I don't know. That's just a very different take that hasn't been done on the show before. So that's 2 firsts right in a row. So DocFugu, you earned the crown on that one.
Oh, well, thanks. I'm not very good at fighting games, but those things are so much fun, man. Yeah.
That's what it's about. I'm all for it. All right. Well, DocFugu, that is all our time for today. Before we go, let people know again where they can find you on the internet.
Yeah, well, catch me on Twitter at DocFugu. So that's spelled like it sounds at DocFugu. And then also I've got a website, FuguTabetai.com, FuguTabetai.com. You're better off just looking at Twitter because the only thing I really do is post up every couple of days a list of things going on in Tokyo. Mm. Sometimes I sporadically translate stuff.
It's all good stuff. All right, folks, and you can find me at Super Joe Monday or at RedditSF on Twitter.com, or you can just hop on our Street Fighter and post anything, and I'll delete it because I'm a mod, and guess what? Your ass is banned. No, we don't run things like that over there on our Street Fighter. It's a different world over there. It's a good place. Go there and read up what's going on the front page of our Street Fighter because there's a lot. We've got the funding for the community funding for Evo, which should be next week's episode. I realized late this morning where I was like, oh fuck, the 100th episode aligns with day 1 of Evo. I've made a horrible mistake because I have nothing planned. So we will see what comes over your podcast feed next week because I don't know. You know as much as I do, listener, and we'll see. There will not be a Monday tournament following Evo, and there will not be a Friday tournament before Evo because we're all going to be there. So there's no chance that we're going to have the online tournament there. So look, just enjoy yourselves, enjoy Evo, enjoy the spectacle of it all. And then we'll catch back up we'll bring back the online weekly the following Monday. So with that, folks, that's a show though for RSF Radio. We'll be here every Thursday. There will be there will be an episode on 100 at some point. I don't know what it'll be, but there will be one. Until that time, though, take care, folks. Peace.